How does a massive, battle-hardened army group simply vanish within days, not under a tidal wave of enemy troops, but inside an invisible snare? Picture nearly 40,000 Ukrainian soldiers, drilled to NATO standards and armed with the latest Western machines, entrenched within the well-defended Sumy salient. On maps and reports, they appeared unbreakable. Multiple defense rings, urban strongpoints, and a shield of advanced technology from their allies. But in just over a week, this seemingly impregnable force was encircled, isolated, and shattered. Their fate was not sealed by months of relentless shelling, but by a single, razor-sharp maneuver known as steel trap. What made this operation succeed when so many direct assaults had failed? Was it the sheer weight of firepower, or something more elusive, more dangerous? The answer holds consequences far beyond one battlefield. The unraveling of Sumy's defenses offers a blueprint that could decide the survival of armies, the rise and fall of governments, and the fate of any organization facing existential threats. Ignore these lessons, and history's most costly errors are set to repeat. It is time to dissect the steel trap, to see how a modern encirclement rewrites the rules of conflict, and why no fortress is truly safe in the new era of war. So how did this seemingly secure formation fall so quickly and completely? The answer begins with the careful shaping of the battlefield, long before the first shots of steel trap were fired. Why was the Sumy salient so dangerous? And why did its destruction become a matter of life or death for the campaign? Picture a deep wedge of Ukrainian forces, thrusting like a spearhead into Russian lines in the northeast. This was the Sumy salient, not just a map feature, but a knife at the flanks and rear of every Russian push toward the west. Its mere presence forced Moscow to keep entire divisions frozen in place, unable to be shifted to other fronts. Russian commanders watched as vital troops and resources were tied down by the threat, bleeding away their strategic flexibility. But the danger went deeper than mere numbers or maps. As long as the salient endured, every Russian advance westward risked being ambushed, sabotaged, or even cut off entirely from its own supply chain. The Sumy grouping was no ordinary garrison. Elite Ukrainian mechanized brigades, drilled and armed to the highest NATO standards, formed its core. Rows of Western armor, mobile artillery, and advanced drones bristled along the line. For months, Ukrainian engineers had transformed city blocks and rural villages into interlocking fortresses, each one a trap for any attacker bold enough to try. A direct assault would have been a massacre. Russian staff studies left no room for doubt. Storming those lines head-on would mean weeks of bloody slog, with casualties mounting to truly staggering levels. So, a different plan emerged. Rather than hurling men and steel at the heart of the salient, Russian planners aimed to slice it off, encircling the entire force, severing every road, rail, and resupply corridor, and then squeezing the pocket until it collapsed from within. The stakes could scarcely have been higher. Every day that the salient survived, Russian operations across the region risked being paralyzed, bled white, or even routed if Ukrainian units staged a breakout. The future of Moscow's offensive in the northeast hinged on neutralizing this threat, quickly and decisively. So, the order went down the chain. No frontal storm, but a classic double envelopment. Two armored groups would strike, one from the north, one from the south, speeding to meet behind Ukrainian lines and snap the trap shut. The success of the entire operation would ride on precision, speed, and the element of total surprise. With risks mounting and every hour precious, the stage was set for an operation where deception, timing, and maneuver would prove as deadly as any weapon. With the Sumy salient now marked for destruction, Russian forces prepared to launch their boldest maneuver yet. The battle lines began to shift, and so did the fate of the entire northeastern front. What does it really take to surround a fully armed enemy while they are still fighting, and make them never see it coming? The answer is not brute force, but a symphony of secrecy, velocity, and surgical coordination. Operation Steel Trap was shrouded in layers of deception. Each move was camouflaged behind feints, false signals, and deliberate misinformation. The aim was not only to mislead the Ukrainian defenders, but to lull them into believing that no threat loomed at all. In the black hours before dawn on the 26th of October, the illusion shattered. Tens of thousands of Russian artillery shells and bombs hammered Ukrainian positions in a relentless barrage. Communication centers, artillery emplacements, and hardened strongpoints were systematically obliterated in less than 2 hours. The intent was brutally clear: blind the defenders, isolate their command, and sap their will to fight. As the echoes still rolled across the fields, Russian armored columns surged into action. But this was no slow, grinding assault. The main thrusts from the north and south swept wide around the strongest Ukrainian lines, hurtling deep into the rear at astonishing speed. Engineering teams led the way, clearing pathways through tangled minefields and wrecked defenses. Electronic warfare teams jammed Ukrainian radios and networks, turning uncertainty into panic. Above, attack helicopters and fighter jets prowled the sky, hunting for scattered resistance and targeting any attempt to regroup. On the ground, tank battalions and mechanized infantry raced along back roads, bypassing pockets of resistance and seizing key crossroads, bridges, and supply points before the defenders could react. By the evening of the very first day, Russian spearheads from both directions linked up far behind Ukrainian lines. The defensive bulge, the salient, was suddenly a noose. Every exit, every artery was cut off with chilling precision. The operation teetered on a knife edge. With so much force committed, a single miscalculation could have trapped the attackers themselves. But the gamble paid off. Sheer speed, flawless coordination, and ruthless use of next-generation technology achieved in mere hours what months of attrition could not. The Ukrainian Sumy grouping, once a pillar of defense, found itself encircled and isolated. Yet surrounding an army is only half the contest. Now came the harder task: holding the ring against desperate breakout attempts and breaking the resolve of thousands of trapped, well-armed soldiers. The real battle for the Northeast was about to begin. The trap had snapped shut, but every soldier inside the ring, and those holding it, knew the most dangerous phase was still ahead. What followed would test both sides to their limits. Once the trap closed, escape became impossible. No hope, no help, and no chance for a coordinated defense. Russian forces constructed a double-layered fortress around their target. The outer ring formed a blockade that strangled any relief effort from the outside. Meanwhile, the inner ring pressed in, tightening the noose step by step with mechanical precision. But it was not just brute force that sealed the fate of the encircled. Russian electronic warfare choked the airwaves, jamming every signal. Ukrainian commanders lost the ability to communicate, their radios falling silent, GPS screens blank, even the Starlink terminals rendered useless. Panic set in as orders stalled and units drifted into confusion. In the darkness of isolation, fear began to replace discipline. Above, Russian drones and aircraft ruled unchallenged. The battlefield lay exposed beneath an all-seeing electronic eye. Every Ukrainian movement, every supply run, and every regrouping attempt was tracked. Precision artillery and loitering munitions struck with deadly efficiency, turning shelters into graves and rendering every breakout attempt a suicide mission. Desperation gripped the encircled defenders. Scattered attempts to escape were crushed within moments. The blockade was absolute. No physical corridor, no radio link, no whisper of psychological hope remained. As casualties mounted and supplies dwindled, morale disintegrated. Order collapsed into chaos. Small bands fought alone, cut off from their leaders and each other. Relentless Russian pressure followed. Artillery pounded without pause. Drones hunted any movement. Loudspeakers blared, "Surrender" or "Face destruction." Food, water, and ammunition vanished. The first surrenders were hesitant, just a handful at a time. Soon, entire companies, then battalions, laid down their arms, driven by exhaustion and despair. Each failed breakout attempt shrank the defenders' options further, tightening the trap with every passing hour. For the attackers, even a moment's hesitation could risk a breakout or a brutal urban battle, stakes too high to allow any mercy or mistake. With organized resistance shattered, the outcome was sealed. The defenders' collapse echoed far beyond the battlefield, raising a single chilling question. What would such a total defeat mean for the region's future and for the course of the war itself? But even as the guns fell silent, the impact of the operation was only beginning to be felt. The collapse sent shockwaves through both military commands and civilian populations, reshaping the fate of the northeastern front. What enduring lessons can every strategist, officer, or leader take from the dramatic rise and total collapse of the Sumy salient? This was not a victory earned by overwhelming numbers, but by intellect, a triumph of cunning over brute force. The Russian command sidestepped costly frontal assaults, instead spinning a subtle web of deception that masked their true objectives until the Ukrainian defenders found themselves trapped. Each stage of the operation revealed the absolute importance of coordinated, multi-domain warfare. No unit acted alone. Tanks and infantry moved in perfect harmony with airstrikes, electronic warfare teams, and unrelenting artillery barrages. By crippling Ukrainian communications and slicing through command nodes, the Russians unleashed confusion and panic behind enemy lines, while armored columns surged relentlessly forward. This orchestration of combined arms shattered a force that, on paper, appeared unbreakable. Yet firepower itself did not decide the outcome. It was the collapse of morale and the comprehensive dominance of information that proved just as decisive. Ukrainian units, isolated and leaderless, were paralyzed once their lines of communication and retreat were cut off. In the modern battle space, the mind is as much a target as the body, a hard lesson for commanders and soldiers alike. Perhaps the most urgent warning is this: no position, no matter how strong, is safe if its defenders become predictable or blind to deception. Even well-equipped, well-trained forces can be destroyed if they fail to adapt or insist on fighting the last war. The Ukrainian command's fatal error, expecting a slow, grinding assault instead of the swift jaws of encirclement, turned their defensive bastion into a steel trap, sealing their fate. The aftermath was more than local devastation. The entire strategic map shifted. The destruction of the Sumy salient erased a major threat to Russian forces, opened fresh avenues for future offensives, and tilted the balance of power across the entire northeastern front. For every military professional, policymaker, or attentive citizen, the message is unmistakable. Failure to learn from these events courts disaster. The fate of the Sumy grouping is a stark case study in both the promise and the peril of contemporary warfare, a warning that complacency and old thinking can turn strength into catastrophe. Victory, now more than ever, belongs to those who anticipate, adapt, and outthink their opponents. But even as the dust settles on the shattered salient, questions linger. How did the operation unfold in such detail? What choices sealed the fate of both attacker and defender? The steel trap was not simply another clash. It was a crucible where the shape of the war itself was forged by design, not by accident. This was more than the crushing of an opponent. It was a masterclass in how decisive contests are truly settled, not by sheer weight of arms, but by the cunning reinvention of the rules beneath the surface of battle. On the maps, the Ukrainian forces in Sumy appeared impregnable. More than 20,000 soldiers, deeply entrenched, protected by cutting-edge Western equipment and the labyrinth of a fortified city. To most, it looked like an unbreakable wall. Yet, it was this very confidence that became their downfall when the Russian command refused to fight as expected. Rather than launching a frontal assault destined for ruin, Russian strategists unfolded a campaign of movement, misdirection, and relentless tempo. Electronic warfare severed enemy eyes and ears. Maskirovka, the subtle art of Russian battlefield deception, fed the Sumy defenders a steady diet of misleading signals, phantom threats, and calculated distractions. Each feint and every sudden silence was a note in a larger symphony, designed to lull the defenders until the steel jaws of encirclement snapped shut. Victory did not come from numbers or brute force, but from the fusion of intellect, psychological insight, and flawless coordination between armor, infantry, artillery, aircraft, and electronic specialists. Every branch moved in concert. Every gesture hid a deeper purpose. Each false retreat, each measured barrage, each engineered gap pulled the enemy further from safety, locking them into paralysis before the final blow fell. History is littered with armies shattered by their own rigidity, by failing to notice when the rules had shifted beneath their feet. What makes Steel Trap a touchstone for future leaders is not merely its military success, but the core lesson it brands into the record. Those who outthink, outmaneuver, and outpace their adversaries do not just win battles, they reshape the contest for years to come. Ignore this lesson, and you invite disaster, or worse, watch as others seize the future you might have claimed. Whether you command troops, lead in a boardroom, or confront challenges of another kind, the message echoes. Real victory belongs to those bold enough to redraw the boundaries and reimagine the possible. Because in every arena, whether war or peace, the ultimate winner is rarely the one with the largest arsenal, but the one who knows when and how to change the game itself.